So, what's your story and how did you become interested in pursuing a structural engineer?
Sure. Yeah, so as I mentioned, I went to Cooper Union. So my high school program actually had a little bit of an engineering focus, and there were some classes in like drafting and some CAD classes, and that really got me interested in kind of how buildings are put together and how they really influence the cityscape. So that's what led me to applying to Cooper Union for civil engineering. And then once I was there, I heavily gravitated towards structures and really focused on that my last 2 years at Cooper, and then applied for the graduate program at MIT. So I did that high performance structures program. And after that, I just started applying to jobs and ended up at Thornton Tomasetti. So yeah, and so I've been there for 5 years now.
Oh, wow.
Mhm.
What is the name of one of the projects you've worked on?
Yeah, so when I joined at Thornton Tomasetti, I'll give you a little bit more background on my 5 years there. So when I first joined, I joined as part structural engineer and part protective design engineer. So I actually worked on designing buildings to be protected from like a bomb blast. So we do, yeah, it's a lot of like structural dynamics involved with the class. You might have had that in your undergrad. If not, you'll likely take it in grad school. And so with like the structural dynamics, it's just understanding how the building and different parts of the building will move in response to a bomb loading that could occur. So we do a lot of projects like overseas, a lot of US embassies in other countries, as well as different like office buildings in New York and around the world, just designing primarily their facade, their skin structure to be able to handle this type of loading. So I spent my first 2 years kind of heavily in blast design and learning all of the specifics of that, which was great because it was just so new. But I definitely really wanted to also have like a more traditional structural engineering experience. So I started getting involved with some school construction jobs in New York. So I worked on a few like concrete structures that are like 5-story buildings for different ages of schools all around the city. So that was really fun to see because I could actually go see my jobs really easily and see the concrete being poured. It was different than like the embassy jobs that I was working on because they were in countries all around the world, so it wasn't as tangible. But yeah, so I really enjoyed working on those school buildings, and then since then I've just continued kind of working on both. But as I've grown through the years with the blast work, I've been able to take on more of like a management role now on some of those jobs, and I'm able to supervise individuals that are doing the calculations, but be really close to like the client relations and make sure that everything's going smoothly and that everyone, has what they need to complete the job well. So I've enjoyed taking that role on the blast side of things. And I guess on the structure side, I started working on some wood design projects also recently, I guess over the last 2 years or so. So in particular today, I want to talk about one of them. It's called Harborside. It's in Norwalk, Connecticut. And so it's pretty typical type of construction in the Connecticut area for housing units. So it's 5 stories of wood framing for residential on top of a concrete podium. And this job also has a steel portion to it to support a pool structure at the roof level. So it was an interesting job to have like all of these materials coming together.
So, you mentioned at the time of this project, how many years of experience did you have?
I guess when I started getting involved, I probably had 2 to 3 years experience.
Does it include the explosion part of, or not?
So I started working on this kind of tangentially. I would have some small design tasks, but I wasn't leading the job at that time. But now, since that other person moved from the New York area to Boston, I've been leading the construction portion of it. So that really started more like a year ago. So I guess after like 3.5, 4 years experience. Um, but yeah, and with the protective design work, the bomb blast stuff, that's been ongoing. So I try to just balance my schedule, and it's different every day. Sometimes I'm like 75% blast, 25% structures, but it's really just dependent on what's going on at the time, what projects I'm working on.
Okay, this is so interesting.
Yeah, I'd say it's different.
Um, what would you say is a typical day on the project?
um, I don't know. There really isn't a typical day, I'd say. Every single day ends up being so different. I think one thing that I didn't really realize when I was in school with structural engineering is that, the project goes through so many phases. Like you'll start a project in schematic design, and that's when, you're working with the architect and you're still trying to figure out like what is the building, how does it look, how many floors are there, what material are we going to use. And then you get to design development, which is when you start really doing calculations and kind of narrowing in on more of a design. And you start producing drawings for the job. And then you have your construction documents, which you finish your design, everything's as coordinated as it can be. And then they start construction. And construction will take, it really depends on the project size, but sometimes a year, sometimes, many years. One of the embassies that I've been working on, they just started construction and it'll take them, I think, 7 years to construct. So it really varies. And during that construction time, you're involved at different levels depending on what phase of construction they're in. So they'll start by sending you shop drawings to show you exactly what they're going to build. And so you have to review all of those and make sure that it's what you designed and that they're giving you what you expect to see. And then they start building, and there's a lot of different issues that come up. You get these RFIs, requests for information, and that it could, depending on the team, it could be a very large part of the project where, those RFIs and submittals take maybe a year or two, whereas the design portion of it might have only been like 6 months. So every job is really interesting, and it's always different depending on, who's working on it and what the project is. But I always thought of that, like, I didn't really realize that when I was in school, that like construction is such a big portion of the job. So there's a lot of like client interactions and speaking with contractors and all. So it was a nice surprise for me to find, because I enjoy that stuff a lot, in addition to design. But yeah, so I'd say back to any typical day, it really depends on what phase of the projects that I'm working on are in and how many I have going on at the time. So I might have, 2 projects going on if they're pretty large, or I've had like 7 projects going on at the same time that are small, but there's always different issues that arise on them that you have to address, sometimes very quickly. So yeah, it's I don't know if that gives you a good idea, but
Yeah.
there's a lot of different things that happen every day. Every day is different. Yeah.
Okay. Is there anything else that you would like to share or like advice as a entering the workforce engineer?
I always enjoyed going to site. That was always a fun part of it, just to see, everything going up. And so you get to go to site when there's like major parts of the design happening. So I would go to see like some of the concrete pours for that podium level, to make sure that they had all of the complicated reinforcement there, right? So that's always fun, and also a little bit daunting because it was my first project going out there alone. So it was, you hope that you get everything right and that you don't miss anything. But it's definitely a little scary the first few times. So now I've done it several times on this job, so it's a lot less scary. But yeah, it's a great experience to go out there and like see it coming together. And it also lets you kind of figure out how to communicate with different people from, all over the world. that are working on these projects. So if something is wrong on the job, you have to figure out how to make sure that they're able to fix it and that they listen to you when you tell them what needs to be fixed. So it could be a little bit daunting sometimes, but thankfully it's always gone well. And yeah, all the projects have finished well. So yeah, I like that component of it a lot. Let me see. I was jotting down some notes earlier to see what I'd want to share. But I guess I was thinking about like just always follow any like connections or opportunities you come across. You know, you never know where your first job will come from. So just make sure, oh, sorry, I'm on the waterfront. That happens sometimes. Yeah, I guess just like make sure that you're always like open to any opportunities that come your way. Like for my first job, they told me I would be doing blast engineering. Like I didn't know anything about it. So I said yes though, because I wanted a job and I liked the company. So, you know, it definitely took me on a different journey that I could have never foreseen, but it worked out really well. So yeah, I think that's one thing. Don't say no to things.
Okay.
Um, you never know where the opportunity will come up.
Right.
Yeah, I guess also when you're looking at a company, make sure that it's something that fits you as well, as a person, and that they have similar goals to what you want to achieve. So for example, in my company, we have a women's initiative that we started about 7 years ago. It's called Women at TT. And it was something that I was really passionate about, and you know, to continue supporting all the women that are around me and figure out how, you know, we can keep up moving through the company and doing everything that we can and want to do. So I got involved with that about 4 years ago now, and I'm the president-elect currently for that organization, and I'll be president next year. So I'd say, you know, I got involved on a whim. You know, I was interested, but they asked me to, you know, be the leader of the mentoring committee. And at the time I was like, I don't know anything about mentoring, you know, but okay, sure. And, you know, I figured it out. And so, yeah, I'd say just that was a really great thing that aligns a lot with my personal values at the company. So it's very helpful to have that opportunity and try to make it what I want from it and have my company support in that. So yeah, I'd say that's, yeah, important to me.
It's good that you mentioned that, because I was just going to ask you, how has been your experience as a female in the engineering industry and challenges that you've seen in terms of leadership? So it's good that you brought that up.
Yeah, I'd say, you know, it's definitely a little bit different. It's not, I guess in your school program, what's the gender ratio breakdown, would you say?
It's like 21%
Really?
female. Yeah.
So I guess that's pretty similar to the industry. I think on average they say it's about 20%, like for the whole U.S. At TT, we're higher than that. We're closer to about 25% for our technical staff. And in the early years, you know, we're up around like 33-35% female. So we're doing pretty well for the industry, which is nice to see, you know, more women around. But it's definitely different, you know, than having it the other reverse way. You know, everything's different. But I wouldn't say I've had any setbacks or anything that's like held me back in my career because I was a woman. All of my managers have been very supportive in everything that I do, and you know, any opportunities that I ask for or try to pursue, they work with me on it. So I think as long as, you know, you just do what you want to do and keep pushing forward, you won't have any challenges come your way. But also you were mentioning a lot of the sustainability items. So there's a lot of different sustainability teams and companies as well that you can take a look at if you're interested. And a lot of the sustainability engineers, they'll work on kind of like the energy analysis of the building and understanding like how, you know, daylight affects the structure based on like where the windows are or like how they orient the building. and they also do a lot of work with like proposing like different materials to be used on projects and just really trying to work to minimize like the embodied carbon of these buildings. So if you're interested in that, that's a really great direction to go in also. And yeah, I guess to other like structural ideas. So in our company, we also have a forensics group, and they do some pretty cool stuff. Whenever like a building collapses or something doesn't quite go right on a project, they pretty much get sent out there and they have to figure out what went wrong and why did it go wrong. So it's like it seems like fun investigative work. I haven't been involved with that part, but their projects seem pretty cool also. So there's so many different things that you can end up looking at. Graduate programs, you could see schools that have a sustainability focus. I know at MIT there were classes for sustainability that I took, and I learned a lot about kind of like the life cycle of a building from like it being built to when it's torn down, and making sure that you think about that when you're designing it, not just what's best right now for the project. It's what's best once the building's gone through its whole life. So that was a new concept that I didn't really know much about before grad school.
Did you do the 1-year program at MIT or how?
Yeah, I did the 1-year program. So there was a set course list and then a thesis add on to that. So in the spring, you focus more on the thesis writing and have a little bit less classes, but you still have a lot of classes and project work. So yeah, I think if you want to do more of a research focus, then the 2-year program might make more sense. I knew a few people that did that, and I think one of the projects that they did was making bricks in India out of like local materials. So they did a few trips to India and like, gathered what materials were available there, and then studied like the chemical composition of them and made sure that these bricks would be good for building with, and came up with like a process to make it even better that could be implemented there by like local workers. So that was definitely a really cool job that they researched for a few years, or for 2 years. And so yeah, if you're interested in more of a research focus, there's a lot of schools that have those 2-year programs, but I think it's different for every school what their curriculum ends up looking like.
Right. Yeah, because a lot of the programs are more like practical. Like so far, what I have seen, they cover just the advanced structure classes, advanced steel, advanced concrete, but leaves little room for this type of fun activities to get involved with. So it's good to know.
Yeah, I think MIT's focus had those advanced classes, but there was also, it kind of felt like a year of like just thinking up anything that you wanted to and like explore it and have fun with it. And we were on a lot of different group projects where we were given a task of like, here's your site, like put a roof structure on top of it. And that's when we played around a lot with like different parametric design and like thinking about what works, what's most optimized structurally, what about for daylight, like what's best for that, or what about the function of the space. So we got to wear a lot of different hats and just have fun thinking about like the whole process. So I think if you're interested in that, you try to look at some of those institutions that do some of those different, more kind of out there classes.
Yeah, thank you. It's been really great to know you. When I saw your profile, I got really excited to hear your story.
Yeah, no, it's really nice to meet you too. I'm, happy to bring up the next generation of people and help in any way that I can. So
sure. Thank you so much for sharing. And I feel like I got really lucky to meet someone that kind of lines up with my career goals. So,
I'm really glad.